video, we're going to talk about the nature and the nurture aspect of gender. So for nature, this is more going to be biological sex characteristics. That's the nature part. Nurture is going to be a little more of gender specifically. So there's several definitions. I'm going to write the words I'm going to define, and then I'll go through and define them. So for the nature part of it, we're going to talk about puberty. We are going to talk about the difference between primary sex characteristics and secondary sex characteristics. We're also going to talk about the difference between sperm arch and menarche. And finally, we're going to talk about what it means to be intersex. For the nature component of it, we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on gender rather than biological sex. And so we're going to talk about gender roles, define that, gender identity, gender typing, and connected term with that is gender schemas. We are also going to talk about social learning theory, as well as androgyny, which is not to be mistaken with being transgender or transsexual. So there's a lot of terms to define so that we have the time in class to have a nice long discussion, including some activities, some videos connected to the nature-nurture question of gender and biological sex. So first, what is puberty? It's the period of sexual maturation during which a person becomes capable of reproducing. So there are primary and secondary sex characteristics that go along with this puberty. If it is something directly connected with your ability to reproduce, that's a primary sex characteristic. So that's the body structures that make sexual reproduction possible. Whereas the secondary sex characteristics are the ones that are non-reproductive. So these are non-reproductive sexual traits. So what would be the difference? Primary sex characteristics, these are going to be testes, these are going to be ovaries. You absolutely have to have them in order to reproduce. Whereas the secondary sex characteristics are going to be things like a lower voice in a male, breasts on a female, body hair, signs that you're going through puberty, signs that you're male or female, but not directly connected to reproduction. You don't have to have a deep voice to be a male who's reproducing. You have to have testes. So that's the primary versus secondary difference. And then we have sperm arch versus menarche. Sperm arch is going to be in males. So this is the puberty landmark. For males, that's the first ejaculation. And in females, their puberty landmark is going to be the first menstrual period. So those are both landmarks of puberty for male and female. And then finally, if you are intersex, what this means is that biologically you have characteristics of both sexes. So you possess biological sexual characteristics of both sexes. So this is not to be confused with when we get down to being transgender, transsexual. This is you are born showing signs of both biological sexes. So when we get down to the nurture part of the equation, you need to know the difference between gender roles, gender identity, gender typing, gender schemas. All those are connected along with social learning. Your gender roles, these are a set of expected behaviors for male or females. Males or females. So this is what boys do, this is what girls do, what is expected of you. you have your gender identity. That is how you identify. It's our sense of being male or female. So you have a male gender identity or a female gender identity. We'll get into whether or not that connects with what your biological sex is or if it's different. You can have gender typing. Everyone does. This is the acquisition of a traditional masculine or feminine role. And we'll talk about how these develop, how you acquire these. Is it nature, is it nurture for this acquisition? What happens if it is more traditional? And so part of that is going to be gender schemas that we'll talk about. So your gender schemas are the concepts that helped you make sense of the world and organizes your experiences of male, female characteristics. So this connects, if you think back to Piaget and his schemas with assimilation and accommodation, that's the schema we're talking about here. So it's the concepts. This is what male is, this is what female is, and that really helps you say, okay, I identify as male, this is what males should do, so I'm going to go and do it. Social learning theory is another element to this, and this is the theory that we learn social behavior by observing and imitating and by being rewarded and punished. So does a little boy get punished for acting like a girl? Does a little boy get rewarded for acting like a boy? That is going to help with that gender identity, that gender typing, what the gender schemas are. Now, if you do not have a hardcore I am male, I am female gender identity, there's a chance you're androgynous. If you have androgyny, that means you are displaying both traditional masculine and feminine psychological characteristics. And we will talk about that more in class and the benefits of that potentially. If you are transgender, that is different than being androgynous. Transgender is the umbrella term describing people whose gender identity or expression differs from that associated with their birth sex. So biologically speaking, they have a different biological sex than they have gender identity. That means you are transgender. Whereas if you are transsexual, you prefer to live as a member of the opposite sex. So it is possible to be transsexual without being transgender. These are not the same exact term. And again, we'll talk about this, look at some videos in class, do an exercise so we can get more into that. But those are the nature, nurture terms that you should know for class for this chapter. Finally, a couple terms beyond this nature-nurture thing that you need to know for class. Just a few more, and these are ones you have definitely heard of before. Connect to sexuality. That's the other thing besides gender that we're talking about. There's just 3 terms here so that we can get into an actual discussion and, again, some exercises, a couple of videos connected to sexuality in class. One term that you should know is asexual. If you are asexual, what that means is you have no sexual attraction. So you are not attracted to men or women, regardless of what your orientation or what your biological sex or gender identity is. And then you have the hormones that are connected with sexuality. The female hormone, the one that women have more of, is estrogen. So this is the sex hormone that contributes to female sex characteristics. and females have more of it. Men have some, but females are going to have more of it. And I'm giving you these terms even though we're talking about sexuality after gender, because this will also come into play when we talk about transgender individuals or transsexual individuals. And then the final term is the male sex hormone, the one that men have more of, and that's testosterone. Again, women do have this hormone as well, but men are going to have more in it, more of it. And this is the most important male sex hormone. So we'll talk about what happens if you have too much, too little, how this affects puberty as well, but also how it's connected to sexuality. So these are the majority of the terms for the chapter, and then we will have hopefully some really good conversations in class connected to these terms.